Hi, and welcome to Decoding AQ, helping you to learn the tools, mindsets, and actions to thrive in an ever-changing world.
Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever the time is where you're listening from, and welcome to the next episode of Decoding AQ. Today with me, I have Mark Babbitt, and he is the co-author of Good Comes First. And you're also based in Colorado Springs from the US, so welcome.
Well, thank you. And welcome to virtually to Colorado, where we just had a spring blizzard yesterday, and we're enveloped in snow. So for all those of you in sunnier conditions, I am incredibly jealous right now.
Well, actually, Mark, we've been pretty blessed. It's been some poor weather here in the UK, but today it's been a blissful sunny day. My wife's been out. She doesn't work on Fridays, and she's been in the garden getting the seeds planted and getting things ready. So it's been an absolutely wonderful day. So not to give the contrast, but that's what happens in the world.
Thanks for that, Ross.
So in my bit of internet stalking, Mark, I uncovered a few interesting things that I just want to share with the audience, and then we'll dive into a bit of your story. But you describe yourself as a culture architect. So I'm going to be fascinated to dig in that a little bit. But as a executive and career coach, a blogger and speaker, and in fact on many top lists. So in the top 100 leadership speakers of Inc. magazine, and also top 50 leadership innovators, in addition to Entrepreneur, Forbes, Inc., Economist, Harvard Business Review, lots of different things that you get up to in terms of your writing and communicating your voice, your thoughts, and your ideas. So I think where I'd like to start off with, Mark, is maybe just about the book, Good Come First. Where did the title come from?
So, Ross, that's an interesting story. Chris Edmonds, a wonderful man and a good friend, co-author of Good Comes First, we were struggling a bit on how to talk about culture architecture, specifically how to build an uncompromising company culture that didn't just dive into the same stuff, I'll use a clean word, that everybody had already been talking to about for 10 years, the end of autocratic leadership, the end of the command and control mindset, the way we've always done it, which we actually labeled Twatty syndrome because of the acronym. We were tired of having the same conversations. We weren't energized any longer by going to mostly old white guys who we're not picking on them. They just happen to be the demographic that makes up 76% of our leadership workforce, and beating our heads against the wall with that same conversation. So we'd written this manuscript. This is pre-pandemic. We'd written a manuscript. We were 99% done with it, and it had already been accepted by the publisher, and we didn't like it. We weren't happy with it. And this is going to sound weird, but thanks to the pandemic, we had to stop and reset. And we ended up talking to a brilliant man named Mark Levy out of New York, and he said, well, first of all, your title's all wrong, and you sound like old white guys. Well, we are old white guys. That's part of the problem. We're old white guys tired of talking to old white guys. And in the first paragraph, we had written, leaders must now ensure that good comes first. And he said, you bozos, that's your title. That's your Jim Collins title. And that's what it really came down to, was leaders who put good first, who are capable of adapting toward good. The data was clear that those are the companies people actually wanted to work for, that they wanted to bring their whole soul, their intellect, their physical well-being to work every day. And it was in pursuit of good. And this is not a new thing. This has been around since the early biblical days. The people who put good first feel better about themselves, and and do better work and are better colleagues and are better, more respectful workmates. And so that's where the title came from. And we have Mark Levy to thank for that, because we weren't smart enough to think of it ourselves.
So it's often hard, isn't it, when you're so inside something to see it, and those nice little flashes of brilliance from the outside view is often helpful. And so in terms of where you speak to these other white guy leaders, to create this kind of more purposeful, more positive and productive work culture, when you say good comes first, what do you define as good?
Well, another great question. So we start the book off by saying we can't define good for you, because right or wrong, everybody's definition of good is different. And it isn't just our definition versus yours, the other old white guy, or a person of color, or anybody else. It's a function of what do we respect most, what do we covet most, what gets us out of bed in the morning. And it's going to be different. For instance, we just did a comparison for a keynote that we did where we compared good for a company in New York City that was substantially different than a company in Huntsville, Alabama. And their religious backgrounds, their socioeconomic backgrounds, the urban versus rural backgrounds, they're definitely, although they both absolutely nailed it when they came to the values they espoused, and there was a lot of crossover, the behaviors that we asked them to define to determine whether they're living those values or not were completely different, because their priorities were different. So in a nutshell, we say we don't care how you define good as long as you live up to our foundational principle, which is equally value, respect, and results. And we came to that principle because when we backed up ourselves and looked at, well, what does good comes first mean? It meant a respectful workplace, and not just respectful just to be respectful. We aren't going to sit around the campfire and sing kumbaya songs, because then nothing gets done, right? The culture as an architect must be purposeful and positive and productive. And if we're not productive, we don't have a company anymore, or we don't have a nonprofit anymore, or we're not serving each other well because we don't have the resources necessary to do that, right? So we're not saying to leaders, look, you've been focused on results for decades, like since the industrial age began. We're not asking you to stop that. We're just saying that an absolute focus on results means you're doing exactly half your job. The other half of your job now, and not in the future of work, right now, is to create a respectful workplace.
It's interesting, isn't it, where we can, see things in concept. We can think about them in theory, and then in reality, it shows up in a whole host of mess, right? So we can go in with this intent, right? We can read a book, we can hear somebody, we can read an article, and we, turn up Monday morning, whether that's on Zoom or physical. And I don't think anybody wants to create a bad culture by design, but it happens. So what are the things that you've seen that starts that creeping in that maybe people aren't as aware of? In the same thought of when you're on the inside, you can't see the title of the book that needs to be. When you're maybe in a bad culture, you might see the outcomes of all people leaving or things there, but you might not really understand or get a handle on maybe what some of the causes are. So what's your thoughts around that of how do you maybe head it off at the pass, or if you've got it, how do you correct it or deal with it?
Well, let me first say, Ross, that and you hit on this, and this may be the direction that you thought this answer would go, and here it is. Cultures are not typically done by design. They're not intentional. Matter of fact, most of them are accidental. And we talk a lot, especially, let's just say we're in the startup world or we're an established Fortune 100 company. We know what our product is or we want it to be. we've done extensive research on who our market might be, how we serve others, what our profit margins are, and 8 million other results oriented metrics and tangible outcomes. But we never sit down and go, what kind of a company do I want to run? And notice I said I want to run, because culture leadership cannot be delegated. You can't go to HR, which way too many companies do, and say, gee, our company culture right now really sucks. You need to fix this. No. That's absolutely not the way it works. Well, the other side of that is, if let's just say you're a startup that's 2 years old, well, whether you like it or not, you already have a culture. And if you're a Fortune 100 company, Fortune 5,000 company, you certainly already have a culture. And it's, the good news is it's never too late to step back and go, okay, I've been on the inside. I don't really know what my culture is. Maybe I believed a little too much about what was said in our About Us page or in the first paragraph of the job descriptions. Maybe it's really not like that. And I need to sit back and assess this culture, because if I'm noticing that it's not working, my frontline employees, the people serving my customers, definitely know it's not working. So, and if you don't mind, I'll give you a quick example. And I'm not saying this to prop myself up, but just to show you how accidental cultures happen. So 1999, I very suddenly became a single father of 4 kids. And I was in Silicon Valley and running a marketing company, and had, clients like IBM and Toshiba and Sun Microsystems, but I was working 100 hours a week, and somebody else was raising my kids, and that was no longer an option. And so I reworked the company culture right there on the spot, and I moved me and my kids up to Incline Village, and I started commuting down when I had to, but mostly this is 1999, I started remote working. And when I did go in, the kids came with me, the dogs came with me. And so we built this amazing culture that happened to coincide with moving to brand new offices, where every time you walked in our company, there were kids there. And not just my kids, 24 employees had their kids there after school, or people brought their dogs to work. And we built this accidental culture that was incredibly family oriented and dog friendly, and customers loved it. The dogs closed more business than we did. And that became our culture. And we never had to advertise for a job. We never had to go to a recruiter. People heard about our culture within, a very stodgy marketing industry, and said, oh, I want to work for those guys. I want to bring my dog to work. I want to have a place for my kid to go after school. And so that became our culture. And by the way, it's been my company's cultures ever since. I haven't worked in a real office since 1999, and I won't, because that's against my personal culture. So all of that to say, sometimes accidental cultures are quite good, right? Look at the early days of Zappos. Look at the early days of Facebook. Even Amazon, which is now known for its incredibly archaic, overly competitive culture. At one point, everybody in Seattle wanted to work for Amazon. Everybody. Now, you have to have just the right mindset, and you have to have just the right level of aggressiveness to even fit in there. But at one time, that culture was considered like the best culture in corporate America.
It's interesting how you described certain events that triggered a shift. So in your example, some of these external environmental shifts in people's lives that then take a different course for the way in which we show up at work, and then the way in which others can show up alongside. And I've heard a lot of times in lots of conversations around recruitment of cultural fit. And I've had other conversations where that would just create this bland echo chamber. And this new idea of sort of cultural add to how do we create an environment that is diverse, but also inclusive, that allows friction, but in ways that it doesn't break something, that actually it is, as you said, about respect. And this isn't easy. to do, and it needs to evolve as you internally evolve as an individual, as your environment, and as your industry shifts. And so that constant sort of movement around culture, like you say, you can't abdicate this out to a department. It is a living, breathing thing. I wonder if you can take me back to maybe environments where it was awful. You've said, a lot of company cultures suck. What was one that you were in that sucked, and what happened? What did it change? How did it change? And what did you do about it when you were in an environment that wasn't great?
I will tell you, in my personal life, I served the United States in the Air Force, and did what every military trained engineer does. When you get out of the military, you go to Silicon Valley and get a job. And I felt guilty because I felt ungrateful. I was living in Sunnyvale, California, under the palm trees, swimming pool, beautiful condo, new wife, newborn baby at home, and I hated it. I hated every minute of it. It was same commute, walk to the same front door, go to the same cubicle, stare at the same monitor for 8 years. And I did everything I could to change the culture. I tried to lighten it up. I tried to make it more entrepreneurial, because that was my an entrepreneur is probably my spirit animal. But I was working for a very old school Catholic Boston-based company run by a very autocratic Russian CEO, and for 8 years I tried to change the culture. And I will say, everything I learned about subcultures happened in that 1980s, 90s decade. I quickly learned that even though my company culture may not be the perfect fit for me, I can help co-create a subculture where we actually enjoy our work and we support each other. And we're not just managers, we serve as mentors to the young engineers coming in. And so I loved everything about our subculture. But then I tried to exert myself, and I tried to say, well, look, we've created this little contagious pocket of excellence over here. We're doing some amazing work. Our customers love us. We're setting sales records. We're setting service records, right? We're doing everything right. Why don't you guys take a look at what we're doing and let it influence what you're doing? And the door was just slammed shut. And so within a week of that door being forcibly slammed shut, without even talking to my then wife, and maybe that's why she's my then wife, I threw up my hands and said, I can't do this. I'm done. And threw the keys to the company car on the boss's desk and walked away from a 6-figure job, and which at the time was huge money, and just said, I'm not living my life like this anymore. The subculture isn't enough anymore. And on Monday, I opened my own marketing company and never looked back. So now that's just one story. I will tell you, in our work, we see cultures that don't work all the time, and it isn't just the big companies. It isn't just the ones who feel they must focus on shareholder value because they're on the New York Stock Exchange. It goes all the way down to small faith-based nonprofits, where it's just this toxic, disrespectful, demeaning, backstabbing culture where people actually start shaking. You close the door or you get off the train as you walk into work, and this is pre-pandemic, obviously, and you start shaking. Like, nobody wants to live like that, right? And now, Ross, we're seeing, and this, we're seeing it all happening again, because now companies are forcing people to come back to work post-pandemic. Right, the mask, the vaccination requirements are all being released, and now we're asking people to come back to a culture that sucked 2 years ago. Well, it hasn't gotten any better, and hence the Great Resignation. This is 50 million people in the U.S. alone have left their jobs in the last 13 months. 50 million people have voluntarily quit. And old white guy leaders want to know why. You know why. You just don't want to deal with it.
Yeah. And I think that story articulates a real situation of what happens where at the last straw, that all of these other indicators are there, and then a last straw is a departure of some form. And that can be great. That's a rebirth. That's an opportunity, for both the people leaving and the organization to rethink, to welcome that feedback and that information, no matter how unwelcome it may be, to give themselves permission to change. Because this challenge of, is it something that's fixed? Is it changeable? Can we shift our culture, or are we just left with the way it is? And I want to share just a quick story because I'd love your take on it. I woke up this morning to the news that a ferry company here in the UK called P&O Ferries have got rid of a number of their staff. Now, they did this via a pre-recorded 3-minute video on Zoom to 800 staff members to be told they were instantly out of a job. And the realities of the way they've executed it, all the things that led up to that event, and now they're rehiring a cheaper set of labor force to deal with because of all their reasons of pandemic, losses, all sorts of things, etc. And so it's all over the news today that why didn't the government get involved? What are all the things of this? A straw was broken and the execution was really poor. And now we have a big media backlash of how decisions were made around a particular culture in an organization. And I'd just love to hear your kind of take from that small bit of information that I've given you of this story of what some of the challenges that might be going on, what are being faced. And even on another scale, if it hasn't been an exodus by your design, i.e. a resignation, but it may be that you're faced with something that you didn't want to resign, but you were told, sorry, we can't employ you. What goes on in that situation and how can people deal with it?
Well, I'll tell you, when this first happened and it made international news, the CEO of Better.com over Zoom, at least it wasn't a pre-recorded conversation, fired 900 people over Zoom. And he thought that was absolutely okay because we talk on Zoom now. We have every feasible combination or conversation on Zoom. Why wouldn't we lay people off digitally, right? And okay, fine. You're the first person to do it, or at least on a large scale. You're still an idiot, but we're gonna give you a pass, at least until we learn more, right? Well, 2 weeks after it happened, you learn all the dynamics and all the particulars and all the things that went into the decision, and you find out just how disrespectful the CEO and the company chose to be, right? Well, now, maybe not on this scale, and 800 that happened this morning is certainly the largest I've heard since Better, but we've heard of companies, 110 people, 200 people, 50 people. And you know what their emphasis was, Ross? We're going to do this on Zoom because it's convenient for us, but we can't be like Better.com. We can't let this out. It can't become a PR issue. Really? So it's okay to be disrespectful if it doesn't make national news, right? And so the whole concept and the reason I'm bringing the ferry company knew better by now. They knew better, and they still chose to do it. And it probably indicates that their company culture wasn't really great to begin with, because that's not a respectful decision. It's not a human decision.
It makes me think of, how do you behave when your mum's not watching?
Yeah.
And that situation of how do you behave when someone's not watching is a real measure of someone's values and ethics, let alone how do you behave when people are going to be watching. It's crazy. I feel the same as you, that maybe you give a pass the first time, but they should know better. To flip it the other way, I know that you, for a number of years now, nearly a decade or so, have been really trying to help leaders understand and improve their workplace culture. And you have, this WQ index of how to do that, how do teams really work well together. So from your example of a subculture and getting that functioning, and then, hey, you were in a whack-a-mole game, and as soon as you tried to get the mothership to do it, you got the whack-a-mole on, is that I guess there's going to be so much differences, even in small companies, of where there's subcultures and subbits going on. How do you deal with that? How do you assess it, and how do you improve it? And how do you not play whack-a-mole and you play get on the pedestal and let's celebrate what's going on here and try and continually play leapfrog of betterment? So give me a little bit of how it came about, how did WQ come about, and some stories of where this has given some real great impact, Mark, for some of your clients.
So maybe this is why your work and ours is so cohesive, Ross, because just like you installed the concept of AQ, we installed WQ, or workplace intelligence, to help leaders explain the difference between ideal and current. And we couldn't go to them and say, your company culture really sucks, people hate working for you, because the About Us page does not say that. The careers page does not say that. My third quarter shareholder report says we're doing really great. Well, no, you're not doing great. People hate working for you. And so WQ for us was a way to say, we can now quantify objectively exactly how people behave within your workplace. And WQ for us is, well, let's define it just for a second, where EQ is individual, it's emotional intelligence of an individual. WQ is the emotional intelligence, if you will, of a work team or a subculture. And the reality is that the CEO sitting up on the 62nd floor of a building in New York or Atlanta, he knows his culture, right? Or she knows what it's like to walk into a boardroom, but she doesn't know what it's like to work on the second floor. And so WQ allows us, by team, by department, by location, by country, if need be, to determine the level of workplace intelligence within a certain team. And just as important, it tells us what those teams are doing really well, what's working really well for them and their customers and their communities, and what's not. And then once a leader has that completely, absolutely objective data, now they can say, well, maybe I should forget about the way we've always done it. And maybe I should go look at this group over here who really seems to have their act together, and their customers love them, and 40% of their employees have referred other colleagues and their friends and even their relatives to work for us. But over here, only 2% of the people have referred their friends and their relatives and their respected colleagues. Well, what are they doing over here in this, what we now call a contagious pocket of excellence? What are they doing that we can emulate? And here's the challenge with that, Ross, is if you get that leader who just says, I'm not going to change, I'm not going to adapt, I'm not willing to accept this objective input, well, then all this data collection was for naught, because if you're just going to keep doing it the way you've always done it, and if you're not going to accept this input and then adapt to this new mechanism, this new culture, this different contagious pocket of excellence, then it doesn't help you. It doesn't. So my experience with subculture led us to finally answer your question to workplace intelligence, or WQ, because we knew within our work that, yes, the company had a culture, and sometimes that culture was great, and sometimes it filtered all the way down. But sometimes that company culture went to a division president or a department manager, and that person was a jerk and completely disrespectful and did not validate the work of others and did not care at all about personal and professional growth. Just get your damn work done. And the company, that no matter how good the company culture was until it got to that point, it was now terrible. And so workplace intelligence allows us to objectively analyze through both interviews and through surveys exactly what it's like to work here at this desk in this department for this boss.
It's interesting, isn't it? When we, even sometimes, you described a couple of times there, when we see it, does it drive change? Right. So even if we get a reflection, and it might be something that we don't like the look of, we don't like the reality, and our immune system comes up with defense, in terms of, well, you need a state of vulnerability, a state of confidence that allows you to learn, allows you to shift. And if you're already feeling a little bit, attacked, or a little bit, hey, I'm not as good as I perhaps thought, how do we respond to that is a really challenging thing to do on the real floor. When you're trying to have respect and feeling, I need respect by continuing to have the answers rather than being vulnerable of, maybe I didn't have them. Maybe I need to adopt some things from that other division or that other area. And I think it goes in real challenge for people when they are feeling vulnerable, how to help even them through that shift and to guide them through it. What would be some of the techniques or strategies that maybe in a one-to-one coaching situation, they might open up to you, Mark, and say, yeah, actually, I am really struggling, but it might not reflect in how they're operating with their teams or their divisions. I would imagine there's many people who feel a little bit like that they're almost behaving, they can see a bit of it, but they're not ready to really come to terms with it, and they need help to come to terms with it. What do you do in those situations? How do you think about that challenge, and how could people who may see themselves in that start that shift?
First, I'll tell you that shifts happen for 3 reasons. One, somebody has an epiphany, and it might be a change in their family situation. It might, maybe they had a heart attack and were fortunate enough to survive, and now they're literally laying in their hospital bed and said, I'm not going to be that person anymore, right? So that's one. 2 is we refer to it as insurmountable market conditions, right? For instance, the Great Resignation right now. There are companies out there that have lost 30% of their workforce in the last 9 to 12 months. They walked away, right? Like in some cases, we've been supplying your paycheck. We've been supplying your security, which is what we thought is what you cared about for 20, 30 years. And now you just walk away. And those insurmountable market conditions make us aware, right? And the third is a leadership change. Most of our clients come to us having become the new CEO or the new division leader or the new team leader. And they say, I know it needs to be different because I've lived it. I've worked here. I just got promoted, or I knew this company's reputation before I accepted this job, and I'm not going to let those conditions continue. And so the trouble is, and this is where we get to the adaptability portion, especially if we can label you as one of these old white guy leaders, and you're in your late 50s to early 70s, and you've only ever led one way, and you were not taught to be vulnerable. Matter of fact, vulnerability was weakness.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
You were taught to be decisive, which means you don't accept input from others, right? You have all these traits that through 1970s were made you a terrific leader, but now it makes you suck. Well, that's the time where people go, you know what? I want to leave a different legacy than what I started. And I'm going to accept input, and I'm going to become more vulnerable and more aware. And it starts with being more self-aware. And before my heart attack, before market conditions changed, before I took this new role, I was one kind of a leader, and I can't be that anymore, or I don't want to be that anymore. It's killing my soul to be that kind of human being. And that's where real change happens. That's where even the staunchest command and control leader says, I'm going to let go of some of that control, and I'm going to let people in, and I'm personally going to adapt, so that enables others to adapt. Yeah. And that's the key. But I'll tell you, the opposite side of this is, we can't go to a company and go, your company culture sucks, right? Right? Nobody's going to pick up the book with that approach. Nobody's going to invite us in for a conversation with that approach. That vulnerability, that self-awareness, whether it's through an epiphany or because they just had no choice, or because they made a conscious leadership decision choice. They've changed companies. They've moved from corporate to nonprofit, or some other leadership change. That's where culture architecture now comes to the forefront, because now people are saying, this go around, my company culture will not be incidental. It will not be accidental. I'm going to think about this ahead of time, and me and the people around me, my fellow leaders, my key employees, my customers, my community, they're all going to help me co-create this amazing company culture where people feel respected, they're validated for their work. We pay way above the average because we actually love the people that work here, and we don't want to lose them. And we're going to treat people very well so they treat our customers well.
It's one of these challenges, isn't it, where it's not about coming to terms with the fact that the way you made decisions before was wrong. It was right in that context, but we can make a new one tomorrow. So for those people, being able to unlearn everything that got them to where they are, all the successes, when you talked about, the character traits or the styles or the behaviors that got them to the position. Now the world has shifted, the environment's changed, so they need to shift the playbook. And that isn't about going backwards and saying, oh, what I did before was wrong. It's now, no, I can do something better, and I can unlock and expand an opportunity. And I think that shift, what we've seen in some of our work, is a lot of it is the right framing, the right languages. So when you become self-aware, is giving people just that permission to shift without a judgment on past. And so that they can move forward in a more freeing way. So I'd like to just touch. Go on.
Just real quick. I just want to add to what you just said, because you asked earlier, well, if you're sitting across the desk in a one-on-one situation, you just kicked on one of the key elements for us is, and we tell leaders, guilt and creativity are mutually exclusive. You can't do both at the same time. And so you're absolutely right. What happened in the past was right at the time, but it's not right now, my friend. And you have to give yourself permission to leave that other stuff behind, because that's baggage. That's not helping you. Leave it behind. Let it sit. And let's let the creativity kick in so we can build something better now.
Yeah, I agree. To unlock, to be grateful, to say thank you to the who I was, but allow me to be something new. And I think everyone reaches that at various phases, whether it's each morning when you look out on the sun and say, well, what kind of person do I want to be today? A little bit better than yesterday in some areas. Absolutely, we all would love that, but often it's hard to see and hard to do. And that's why having people around us and having the stimulus around us is so important to do. And if we have, perhaps this rate of change that's going on everywhere, whether it's the disruption that was accelerated by COVID, technology, or big people shifts, we only have to just close our eyes for a 12-hour period, get up the next day, and things look a little bit different. What are maybe some of the just very simple tips that leaders can do to maybe even understand cultural architecture? And therefore, the tips, you mentioned a few things of being deliberate versus accidental. When we bring that down to a practical, tactical thing, where could they start with that to begin their journey of re-architecturing a culture that works for them now?
That is the best possible question, and the answer is surprisingly simple, Ross. It's how quickly do you reward desirable, productive, positive behaviors, and the flip side of that is which destructive, demeaning, hurtful behaviors, hurtful to both the people in the business and the business. So both respect and results, hurtful. What behaviors do you tolerate? Because we build culture on the behaviors and the values rewarded. We tear down culture based on the behaviors that other people watch us tolerate. And there's a really simple example of this. Salespeople, there's always that one person in sales, and they are undoubtedly one of the highest performers. They meet their quota every time. They do whatever it takes to hit the numbers. They're making a boatload of money, and that's what they're driven by. But they don't treat others with respect, and they're demeaning to women, and they treat people of color maybe differently than they treat people of the color they are, and it's all about me. Well, the sales manager, the VP of sales, says, well, you just described Rick, and we can't lose Rick. He's our best sales guy. So you are consciously tolerating these sexist, racist, demeaning, discounting behaviors. So that's your company culture. Whether you like it or not, that's your company culture. You are racist and sexist, at least within that subculture, and that's okay with you. Well, you've compromised. And once you've compromised your values, now we lose not just trust, but we lose respect. And once we lose, we know now, the data shows us, to have that productive, positive, purposeful culture, respect must be as valued within the culture as results. And so we tell people, look at every employee you have and start with your leaders and say, are they a high performance match? Do they do their jobs well? Great. Of course you want to keep them. But now you need to look and see if they're a high values match. We've helped you define the values that you want to live by, and we've helped you define 3 to 5 behaviors that would indicate whether a person's living those values. Are they exhibiting those behaviors? And if they're not, they're a low values match. And no matter how great they are at the performance side, if they're a low values match, unless you're compromising, they can't be here. So we'll mentor them, we'll train them, we'll coach them, we'll do everything possible to help them thrive within not just performance expectations, but respect expectations and values and behaviors. We'll give them every opportunity to raise that level of their game. But if they do not, if we let them stay, we are compromising, and we have sacrificed our company culture for the dollar, for the revenue, for the sales. And once you do that, it's all over. So now, the opposite of that, Ross, is the world knows that one person that's a total jerk and only cares about himself or herself and doesn't care about the culture and doesn't even try to fit in, doesn't try to make the world a better place. And now a leader goes, you know what, Rick, you can't be here anymore. We love your work. We love your performance. We love your productivity, but you're making other people feel disrespected and you can't be here anymore. We're showing you the door. As soon as that happens, the entire sales floor goes, hallelujah, it's about time. Now let's go get some work done, right? And now we've established through our actions what we stand for and what we won't stand for. And now we've proven to everybody on the floor, we're not going to compromise when it comes to company culture. And we're not going to let somebody treat others disrespectfully. It's not who we are. It's not who we will be. We will show you the door too if you go that route. And boom, now we have a solid company culture where people actually want to show up every day.
It's interesting. So the two aspects that people need to think about is, what are the behaviors that we're going to reward, not just the results that we're going to reward, and what are the behaviors that we're not going to tolerate, and then act on that non-tolerance is just a really easy way to begin that journey of deliberate architecting a culture, to know it. And it made me think, actually, as you were talking, of RoboCop and the prime directives. What are your company's prime directives? Not I will do no harm to other humans. What are those? Do you know what they are? We might go the values, and I see that time and time again, but actually, what's the flip of those things? What are the things that show up that are the bad tolerances, the principles that underpin some of those? Because if you haven't thought about it and you haven't communicated it, you're already accepting a whole variety of things. I've got one last piece, and I'm so conscious of time as well, Mark, but my last piece is this challenge of, it's a personal thing that I'm trying to deal with, and I don't think it's any different to many others, is when I ran my previous business, I prided myself on having a good court sense. We had a staff, a small company, I had 25 people, and I could go in and I could feel what was going on. It's a bit like in sports, playing the fullback, whatever. You could see the various movements, the different bits, and you'd be able to tap it in the areas before it went too wrong. And you'd be able to catch them when they're doing it right, when it goes right. Now we're in this hybrid challenge. And whilst, I've got epic amount of trust, we've got a real distributed team across so many time zones, and this balance between, we see the results, but how can we see the behaviors that go on in breakout rooms, in other pieces, in other areas, for me to be able to celebrate that? And the culture we have is, we start every meeting with a positive focus. Who are you grateful for in the team of what they've shown up? So we can start to just bring it to light. But I think it's a real challenge for many businesses, as much as an opportunity, of culture in this hybrid world. So perhaps in the last couple of minutes, I know it's a big topic, but what are the areas around a hybrid opportunity for our cultures that you think would be good things for companies to start to think about, or opportunities that they could uncover in that sort of environment?
First of all, this could be a 45-minute conversation all by itself.
I'm sure it could,
yeah.
Maybe we'll have to do part two, Mark.
Yeah, we'll do part two. So this is where I'd like to think, because I've worked from home since 1999, and we've learned over that time what works and what doesn't. And I'll tell you, the number one thing that we're telling leaders to focus on now, because in the old, when we were all in the office, most of us managers were focused on two things: compliance and conformity. Just show up on time, get your work done in the amount of time we asked you to do it, and go home at the end of the day, right? And it just can't be like that anymore. It can't be. That management mindset is gone, and it's not just gone for today as we're coming out of the pandemic. It's gone. And Gen Y and Gen Z are going to make damn sure it's gone, because they don't want to be ruled. They want a collaborative environment, and so we're telling people, you got to let go of a lot of issues, and you got to let people, since in the hybrid world, you're automatically giving up when, where, and how the work gets done, right? That's a given. You no longer control that, right? So how then do you maintain that modicum of control, the compliance, the conformity? Well, don't completely replace that with building not necessarily a best friend relationship, but a productive one-on-one mentor relationship, and start talking about what's really working well for you right now in this hybrid environment. What's working well, what's not, what resources do you need, how can I help you? I mean, you're already being reasonably productive or incredibly productive, but what's keeping you up at night? What's your barrier to success? And once a leader starts asking those questions, well, now the person's going, wow, she actually cares about this hybrid environment. And so that's the secret, Ross. Replace all of the compliance and conformity and control with building that mentor relationship where you don't just care about the work, but you care about the person doing the work. And that's how you build culture within a hybrid environment, because you don't control anything else.
Yeah. And it's these two pieces, isn't it? It's how can I help? Not with the undercurrent of I think you're not doing well, is I believe in you. I believe in you, and how can I help? And that context is a great environment. Mark, if people want to, if people will want to get in touch with you, how do they best do it?
Well, the first thing I'll tell you is both Chris and I, we still manage all of our own social media. We handle everything personally. So we're on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, everywhere. He even got me on Instagram, which I haven't quite figured out yet, but I'm working on it. I'm an old white guy. I'll figure it out. But also visit goodcomesfirst.com. That's where you can learn quite a bit about the book and our process for writing the book. And frankly, you might learn enough on the site just to learn whether a culture change initiative is right for you and your company, and then reach out. We're happy to help.
Fantastic. Mark, it's been a real pleasure. And I just want to share my gratitude for a great conversation, one where I've got lots of principles to reflect on and think about, and no doubt are going to have positive impact for my team as well. So I want to thank you for that. And I look forward to continued collaboration with you, Mark.
Thank you for the conversation, Ross.
Hi, everyone. Mark and I have just been having a great conversation after I clicked stop. And in our conversation, it reminded me, I didn't ask Mark the question of when was the last time you did something for the first time, and what was it?
So for me personally, I went fly fishing, and I know that it's got nothing to do with work or culture or books or anything, but
everything. Or maybe everything, Mark.
I have 5 children ranging from 34 to 15. 15 next week. And my youngest son wanted to learn how to fly fish. And I went, okay, let's do it. And so there's a pond right behind our house here in Colorado. And we bought the gear. It's sitting right there. And God, we sucked. There's going to need to be lessons involved. But it was invigorating just to try something new and to laugh when we realized just how bad we were at this, and to just be able to laugh about it. It was a fun moment.
Thanks, Mark. And that piece of when we do something that we don't know how to do, to face it with a smile, to face it with humor, how might we bring that into our work? How might we go to a place where, hey, we're doing something for the first time? It might be we've done it many times, we've got new eyes, or the environment's new that makes it different. How can we face it with a smile and a bit of humor? So thanks again, Mark, and for the opportunity to get that question in. And thanks for everybody for listening.
Do you have the level of adaptability to survive and thrive the rapid changes ahead? Has your resilience got more comeback than a yo-yo? Do you have the ability to unlearn in order to reskill, upskill and break through? Find out today and uncover your adaptability profile and score, your AQ. Visit AQai.io to gain your personalized report across 15 scientifically validated dimensions of adaptability. For a limited time, enter code PODCAST65 for a complimentary AQME assessment. AQai, transforming the way people, teams, and organizations navigate change. Thank you for listening to this episode of Decoding AQ. Please make sure you subscribe on your favorite podcast directory, and we'd love to hear your feedback. Please do leave a review, and be sure to tune in next time for more insights from our amazing guests.